Welcome to Cosmic Mother Ministries. My name is Reverend Penelope. I'm a shaman and a prophetess. Welcome. Thank you for all your support. This is where we talk about everything divine feminine, recapping on our history, finding out who we are, sharing resources and information. This is a true sisterhood and a safe, sacred space just for us. Thank you, sister, for being here. Thank you. Today, I'm going to be talking about the goddess temples. In the Bible, you will see it called Kadesh. And when you're looking for it, you might see it under a sacred sex, or what do they call it? I hate this term, a sacred prostitute. I hate that term because that is what patriarchs have broken down something so beautiful, so divine, into something immoral, so degrading. They have just given that a word that prostitute is not the right word for that. I can kind of bet that they made that up. So let's dive in here, and we're going to go over a lot of things today, and I'm going to break a lot of things down. So I'm going to give you a little thesis I wrote on there, and because I want to stay on point with this. And I'm going to give my commentary through this as well. In ancient Hebrew, the word Kadesh is a beautiful word coming from the root word Kodesh, meaning to consecrate. A Kodesh is a specially consecrated man, and a Kodashah is a specially consecrated woman. And the Kodosh is a specially consecrated thing or place. Common word for male prostitutes in Hebrew is also eunuch. Did you know that? So when we're looking at the eunuch in the Bible, I always thought that meant that that was men with no phallic. That's what I thought that meant, or men that did engage in sex. That's what I thought it meant. And I found out through this research, it is totally something different. So see how the patriarchs have played with our minds, have changed the meaning of things. We're truly living in an upside down world because it's not natural. And that's why a lot of us are starting to wake up today. Sacred prostitution temples, prostitution cult, prostitution and religious prostitutions are purported rites consisting of paid intercourse performed in context of religious worship, possibly as a form of fertility rite or divine marriage. We know there was a central place of the goddess in prehistoric cultures, from Europe to India. Figurines of this goddess date back to about 35,000 BC. These ample bosom figurines suggest that the first role of the goddess was fertility, then blessing families, animals, and land with the rich, abundant life. 30,000 years later, we begin to have a written pictorial record, and from this written record, we can see remarkably similar development of the specially consecrated women, and there were men, expanding with civilization from Mesopotamia to include both the Mediterranean and India. Across this span of geography, history, there was a common thread in the temple of Sister of God, whether that goddess be named Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte, Isis, Aphrodite, or Durga. So, like I've told you, if you've been on this channel or on my other channel on chemistry, I've always said that this was an international thing among women. This was women's spiritual practices. So it's no surprise to me that you see this everywhere. Okay, because these were the first temples here given to civilizations. Okay, and all of them came from the beginning of this, started with dark skinned women. I want to be absolutely clear about that. In ancient times, sacred prostitution or temple prostitution was intertwined with the religious, social, economic systems, particularly regions like Mesopotamia, Phoenicia, and ancient Greece. The women involved, often referred to as sacred priestesses, were sometimes part of the temple religious hierarchy, performing rituals associated with fertility and divine blessings. The wealth they gained directly or indirectly depended on the several factors, including the temple's influence, their social status, and the wealth of their patrons. Here are some key points related to the wealth financial aspect, sacred prostitute. Now, my thing when I got in here, I really was wanting to know about the money, because that is what the church today is really benefiting off of, our ignorance and our wealth. For I don't know what they got going on in there. I'm not trying to say all of them are like that and there's nothing in there, but really look at the wealth of the temples then and the temples now, their influence. Temples were significant economic centers. In many ancient societies, they acted as repositories of wealth, holding land, livestock, valued goods. Temples could lend money, own land, collect offerings from worshippers, which contributed to their vast wealth. As integral parts of the temple system, sacred prostitutes benefited from overall prosperity of the institution. Sacred priestesses were often part of the wealthy temple economies, especially in the major cities like Babylon, where temples dedicated to the goddess of Ishtar, the goddess of love, fertility, and war, held immense wealth. The income from the offering given by worshippers seeking divine favor or blessings for fertility could be substantial. Offering from worshippers who visited the temples, particularly the wealthier ones, would give offerings in exchange for ritual services of sacred prostitutes. These offerings could include money, jewelry, livestock, valuable goods, depending on the wealth and status of the individual. In some cultures, engaging in sexual rites with sacred prostitutes was considered a way to please the goddess and ensure prosperity, fertility, or success in personal endeavors. The priestess will receive these offerings either for the personal use of or as part of this as the temple's treasury. Temples in turn redistributed wealth, and priestess may have gained access to fine clothing, jewelry, privileges within society. In many cultures, sacred prostitutes held higher social status than ordinary women. For example, in ancient Mesopotamian, priestesses, including those who engaged in sacred prostitution, often had more freedom and autonomy compared to other women. They could own property, engage in business transactions, and even wield political influence. This social status often translated into material wealth and protection. Priestesses also associated with the fertility goddess, like Ishtar in Babylon or Aphrodite in Greece, were not seen merely as common prostitutes, but intermediaries between the divine and the human realms. This sacred role added to their respect and in many cases to their material comfort. Wealthy patrons or kings often visited these temples and made generous donations as part of their worship and political alliances. For instance, rulers would provide tributes or large gifts to temples to gain favor from the goddess and the priestess, hoping for divine intervention in matters of war, harvests, or dynastic succession. The connection between the sacred prostitutes and the power patrons could lead substantial personal wealth for some women, especially those who formed relationships with influential figures or became part of temple's leadership. Ownership of the temple and resources. In some cases, temples own large swaths of land, agriculture, production. Remember, I told you our ancient mothers were hunter-gatherers. They had control of all the land, most of the land, and the agriculture. With the priestess overseeing or benefiting from these resources, the wealth generated from the land ownership, along with temple donations, allowed these institutions and the women within them to wield considerable economic power. We were a force to be reckoned with. We were a force to be reckoned with. Now, you see a little bit of that when you look at Superhead. Break this down for you. When you look at Superhead, because a lot of people criticize Superhead, but in one of those temples, she would have been a high priestess. She would have wield great power, and she probably already do. She probably already do. Because she probably have men all over the world asking for her services since she came out. That don't stop her flow. That don't stop her flow. You can see another piece of that when you look at our arts. When you're looking at who you look at, Nicki Minaj, Glorilla. When we look at these women, Cardi B. When we look at these women, because women was in these temples, what went on is the arts, and that was sing and dance. So Cardi B and Glorilla, Nicki Minaj, and that day they would have been in those temples. They would have been singing. They would have been mastered the art of seduction, the art of healing. They would have mastered the art of sex. They knew how to open up their Kundalini and help men do the same thing through the arts of tantra, sex. It is no different from today. The only difference today is that energy is misdirected. Women don't know who we are. Now just imagine, because I do all the time, that's why I'm doing this, to wake women up. Imagine if women had their own temples. That money, we won't give no money to Christianity anymore because it's nothing but brainwashing for women. That's all Christianity is in its misogynistic form. It was created not just for racism. It was created to brainwash women first, before it was even used for slavery. Men brainwash women with it. We were rich. We were a force to be reckoned with, and it took them a while to do this. Let me not jump ahead, but just imagine that. So they said when they came up on the shores, we had many lands up on the shores, just like what I said. Ancient Mother has been working hard with me since on this. When did I write my book? Matriarch to Patriarch. I wrote that book about 9 years ago. And when I wrote that as a thesis in college, they didn't want to accept it. And so the Great Mother was like, you need to write this book. It needs to be out there. And then after I wrote it, I said, I can't talk about this because no one is talking about this. They're not ready. And she said, go ahead and write the book. And when it's time, you'll know. And so here we are today.
Sexual energy, period, is a feminine energy. And so in so many words, he fights against himself. And the mystery here is we're talking about the Kundalini energy, which is a feminine energy. And that's what's the mysteries of the black man, the ones who have the full manifestation of this Kundalini energy is, it's a feminine energy in the particular aspect when you are with your mate. We're not talking about homosexuality. We're talking about when you're with your mate, you are two entities of the same essence. You are actually one. You see what I'm saying? So when you fight against the energy that you're thinking you're trying to preserve, the energy that you're trying to preserve is the feminine energy. And you're fighting against nothing because you're fighting against your own self. So in so many words, Shiva, which is Osiris in this dice game, he will always lose when it comes to the system. You see what I'm saying? Because although both of the energies on the inside of it is feminine, by him having this masculine shell, he thinks that he's different. And he's actually not. Because sexual energy is a feminine force. The fire is a feminine force. So if the Kundalini is a feminine force, and the physical body is an illusion that don't exist, a series of events that don't exist, it's the matrix. And the Kundalini, which is hooked up with the chakras and the endozones of the pineal gland, and if the Kundalini is the basis of the feminine force, and they say our God is an all-consuming fire, and it is a feminine force, that means that there's no such thing as male.
Hathor fire.
There's no such thing as male. There's just only opposite counterpart, or a half, a female, that appears as male, and especially when it's a connection when it comes to the black man. Because even Maulana Karenga said it. He said that the only person on the planet, other than women and the black woman, because that's the basis. The other motherfuckers ain't real, so they don't count. We're talking about us, the original people. Right. That's discriminated based on sexism, because sexism was before racism. But not only do we have racism, the sister is discriminated against with sexism. The only other person that is looked on and is discriminated against based on sexism is the black man. Because the white man has discriminated on the black man based on his sexuality. Based on feeling inadequate, feeling jealous, or whatever. That is a form of sexism. That is not by mistake. That they talk about the feminine force. Now the whole Matrix books, the big Matrix books, the Al Valerian book came out in 2001. It actually came out in 2000 with talking shit about the feminine principle, but what you don't understand, when they was talking about shit about the feminine principle, they was talking about the black man too. Because they're talking about the Kundalini energy outside of the physical is a feminine energy. Black man, you go through hell because you have something about you that is different than any male on the planet by you being the original person, and it has something to do with your astral nature on the inner self or the inner planes, is that your insides and the energy that you are driven from when you lay in that rod, you know what I'm saying, your Johnson, your dipstick, is a feminine energy. That even the whole concept of your penis is nothing but an extension of the woman. It's a feminine energy.